Hello students, it's Fabia Inam, and we are going to talk about today about the second part of writing business messages. I hope you have understood the previous part, and now we are going to talk about more into about the writing, how to write a business message. So let's move on. So it's very important how you sequence or articulate the message, right? Because sometimes if you don't sequence it properly, the whole message, no matter how important the message is, it looks very clumsy, and when you read it you actually don't understand most of the part of it. So that's why no matter whether the message is small or big, so you should always sequence the message properly. So for this regard you can do it, or you can apply two kinds of approach. One is the direct approach and another one is the indirect approach. What does direct approach means? In direct approach you give a little bit of introduction, you talk about a recommendation, and then you talk about the main topic or the evidences that you got regarding the message. On the indirect approach, it's actually the total opposite of direct approach. It talks about, in the very first paragraph you talk about the evidences, you talk about the reasons or the causes that you are sending this message. Then you talk about, later you talk about the recommendation or maybe some analysis and things like that. Okay, so between these two there are three kinds of messages regarding it, like the audience reaction. So audience can be happy, audience can be mad, or audience can be neutral. Okay, so these kinds of three kinds of reaction we usually see. Then the message length, so it's always very tricky, what will be the message length. So it obviously depends on situation to situation. And but if you write down a business memo, then obviously the memo itself is a small thing, and so you should concise and briefly write it down. But if you write down promotion message or a letter, then obviously the message will be a bit bigger. But always think about try to fit in the message into one page so that everyone can read it through very quickly or at a glance. Okay, then the message type. So there are various type of message types, and we are going to talk about how to write these messages later on. So there are this good news message, there is this bad news message, and there is also persuasive message. So there are lots of kinds of messages then within the message type. Okay. Okay, then composing the business message. So obviously we have already talked about it, the right style and tone. So it also depends on your who are your audiences. So you have to set the style and tone regarding it, whether you will be very formal or whether you will be semi-formal or whether you will be casual. So it depends on what kind of situation, it depends on what kind of organization you work in, what are the culture over there. So it depends on lots of issues. So you have to observe and write down the things about it. But obviously writing a formal message is always is considered better option, right? Then effective sentences. So you have to write down some effective words to do that. And coherent paragraphs, like one paragraph and another paragraph, there should be a link to it. It shouldn't be sound that one paragraph is from another message, and the second paragraph is from another message. Okay, so there should be a correlated relationship between those paragraphs in between. Okay, so how you balance down your writing. So there are obviously some words, abstract words and concrete words. So sometimes if we see in a bigger picture or in a vague situation, we use these kinds of word. And when we actually talk when we write the message very straightforward and to the point, we use the concrete words. Okay, then there are some of the words that we choose to communicate, like use strong words. So what you understand by strong words? So it's like, I am very happy. Rather than saying happy, why don't you write down like, I am very delighted? Okay, or this thing is very pretty. Okay, so rather than saying it's pretty or beautiful, why don't you say like it's like let's say fascinating, or it's like gorgeous. Okay, use the better options of the words. Okay, so use strong words to describe your or opinion, or describe how you feel. Then use familiar words, the words that everyone is already familiar with. Don't use those difficult words that people has to people have to like find those words in a dictionary. Okay, so use the familiar words so that you can actually read the message without looking up to the dictionary. Okay, then avoid cliches. Okay, so what does cliches means? So cliches is sometimes the phrases that we use in various kinds of things. Like, let me give you like some examples. It's like, cat got your tongue. Or there are some of the Bengali cliches that we use very frequently, like chok chok korle shona hoy na, then khali kolshi baje beshi, these kinds of things. I think you have a good idea regarding it. Okay, then comes minimize the jargon. So jargons actually varies from business to business, organization to organization. So there are particular some business jargons, but there are obviously some jargons in other subjects as well. So it's like, if we talk about business jargons, so there are some of the jargons that we use, like the 9 to 5 job. Okay, so what does 9 to 5 job means? It's like you work between the 9 to 5. So it means a typical blue collar or white collar job. Then it comes the core competency. Okay, so there is another jargon, is core competency. So it means that your strategy to achieve it. Okay, so there is another jargon called due diligence. So these are the jargons that is familiar, and we use it very widely. Okay, then comes writing effective sentences. So obviously I think you have already familiar with these kinds of grammatical things, and I'm not going to teach you grammar over here. So there is this sentence and simple sentence, compound sentence, complex sentence, and things like that. Writing the effective sentences based on the situation is also very important. So you don't always have to write a complex sentence. You can actually also write down a simple way to putting it down using a simple sentence. Okay, then of course come the effective sentence style. So you can use the key relationship, and also emphasize on the ideas that you actually are working on. Okay, and so these are some of the things appropriate for your audience. So the key relationship mainly basis on the relationship between you and the audience is very important. So on the basis of that, you can write down your message. Okay. Then comes again the grammar part. Art, it talks about whether you use the active voice. So usually it's recommended to avoid the passive voice in general. So there, here are some of the examples. So I think you will be familiar when you read it out. Okay, so there is obviously some of the time the passive voice is also related. And it's like if there is a negative message, so it's better to write down in a passive voice rather than an active voice. Okay, so look at the examples. Okay, so what do you mean by coherent paragraph, that we have already discussed? Paragraph is obviously a cluster of sentences and all related with the one general topic. So it's very widely in length, form, and types like that. So it's always important how long your paragraph is. Okay, so whether it's like a 10 line sentences, or whether you write down a 20 line sentences in a paragraph. Okay, so obviously it should be a standard size. So let's say 10 to 15 sentences is in a paragraph is good enough. Then how you develop it. Okay, how you go one idea to another idea, how you explain it further. So we use some of the coherent or linking words, like moreover, first of all, second of all, or firstly, secondly. So when we actually talk about the ideas that we want to pitch in. Okay, then of course a unity, the whole message should have one unity. It's not that like in one paragraph you write about one thing and in the second paragraph you wrote about another thing, so it sounds very clumsy and messy. So that's why the whole message should have a single unity and coherence. It's easier for the reader to read and understand, and as well as it's easier for the writer to express his views more clearly. Okay, then comes some paragraph development techniques that we have already talked about, like what does it mean, like what do you mean by illustration, what do you mean by comparison and contrast, what do you mean by cause and effect, or classification and problem and solution. So these are all the things like how we actually use these kinds of things, and we can use these words in between in it actually put much sense in the meaning of the messages. Okay, so these are some of the frequently used transition that we have already talked about, like moreover, in addition, similarly, for example, formally, in brief, to sum up, to wrap it up. These are the words that we frequently use to understand or to express our views. Okay. So these are some of the format with the technology. So I think in this course we are all we also talk about some of the technology that we can use in communication. So in especially in writing, in like WordPress is very interesting, and the website itself, and it's free. You can write down the blogs and your ideas about it. So there are some of the wizards. Microsoft Word also offers that, the smart documents, auto completion, then mail merge, and stuff like that. So I think most of the things you're already familiar with. It's a thing that we should already consider before. Okay, our okay, so our chapter ends here. In the next class, we are going to talk about a new topic. So if you do have any question, do ask in the class, as the faculties are going to discuss it with you. Okay, so I'm going to give you some of the activities is of writing the messages in your lecture note or in your extra material or exercises folder. So look into that. So you need to practice it. It will be good practice, and you also need to submit it to your faculty as an assessment. Okay, so thank you everyone, and have a nice day.